My name is Jenna. I'm 35, and I work as a senior project consultant for an infrastructure development firm. I spend roughly a third of every year in other countries, managing timelines and budgets on contracts worth more than most people's neighborhoods. I know how to read a financial discrepancy from 3 rooms away. I know when numbers don't add up before anyone admits they don't add up. And I know, with the specific certainty of someone who paid off a property at 32 through 8 years of disciplined choices, exactly what it means when someone uses what belongs to you without asking. So when I came home from 12 weeks in Dubai and found a handwritten thank you card on my kitchen counter from my cousin Derek, I set my bag down slowly. I picked up the card. I read it twice. "Thanks for letting me crash here while you were away," it said. "The place was perfect. Your folks are the best. Oh, you won." I looked at the card. I looked at my kitchen. The furniture had been moved slightly. The way furniture moves when someone lives in a space and doesn't know exactly where things go. There was a coffee mug on the drying rack that wasn't mine. A bottle of hot sauce in the cabinet I'd never bought. I set the card back on the counter. I picked up my phone. And I called Derek before I called anyone else. Because Derek, I already understood, was not the problem. He was the person who would tell me the truth. My parents thought 3 months and 12 time zones were enough distance to make something like this invisible. They had not counted on a thank you card. They had not counted on Derek picking up on the first ring and answering my questions with the open confusion of someone who had genuinely believed every word they'd been told. And they had not counted on what I was going to do before the week was out, with the bank records Derek sent me and an attorney's phone number I'd had saved in my phone for 2 years. Welcome to the Family Ledger, where we talk honestly about money, family, and the cost of the things nobody puts in writing. If you've ever come home to find something was taken from you while you were gone, this story is for you. Subscribe, drop a comment, and let me take you back to where this started. I want to tell you about the apartment first. Not because it's just a property. Because of what it took to make it mine, and what that means in the context of what my parents did with it. I bought the condo in East Nashville when I was 28. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, exposed brick in the living room, a kitchen window that faced a courtyard with a magnolia tree that bloomed in April and made the whole block smell like something worth coming home to. I paid $187,000 for it in a market that was already moving, and that has moved considerably since. I made extra principal payments every month for 4 years. I paid it off at 32. I want to sit in that sentence for a moment. I paid it off at 32. Not because I earned an extraordinary income, although the consulting work pays well. Because I structured my life around one priority for 4 years, and I did not deviate from it. I did not take vacations I couldn't afford. I did not upgrade my car. I meal prepped on Sundays and brought lunch to client sites in other countries, and put the difference between what I spent and what I earned directly onto the principal every single month without exception. The mortgage payoff was the quietest significant moment of my adult life. No party, no announcement. I transferred the final payment on a Tuesday morning from my home office, received a confirmation email, and sat with my coffee for about 10 minutes looking at the magnolia through the window. It was mine. Completely and only mine. That mattered in ways I don't have simple language for. Growing up in my family, ownership was theoretical. My parents, Frank and Carol, rented their entire lives. Not because they couldn't have bought, but because the decisions that lead to ownership, the delayed gratification, the structured sacrifice, the 10-year view instead of the monthly view, were not the decisions that felt natural to them. They were good people in the ways that counted. Present, warm, generous with what they had. But they moved through their financial life the way some people move through weather. Reacting to what was immediately overhead rather than preparing for what the forecast said was coming. I had learned by watching them. I had learned what I wanted to do differently. And the condo in East Nashville, paid off at 32, was the physical proof that I had done it. When I took the Dubai contract 12 weeks earlier, I had a conversation with my parents before I left. I gave them the spare key, as I always did when I traveled long-term. Emergencies, I said. If something happens with the pipes or the building needs access, or there's a storm and the window needs checking. Emergency use only. My father nodded. My mother said, of course, sweetheart, we'll keep an eye on it. Those 4 words, we'll keep an eye on it. I had understood them to mean passive monitoring. What they apparently meant to my parents was active management. I need to tell you about Derek before I tell you what happened. Because Derek is not a villain in this story, and I want to be clear about that from the start. Derek is my first cousin on my mother's side. He's 28, works in restaurant management, and has the particular energy of someone who is genuinely trying to build something, but keeps finding himself slightly behind the timeline he planned for. He's not irresponsible exactly. He's just optimistic in the way that creates gaps between expectation and reality that someone else usually ends up filling. When Derek needed a place to stay for 3 months, apparently my parents offered him mine. I don't know the exact conversation, I only know what Derek told me, which was this. His uncle Frank, my father, had called him in early October and said that Jenna was going to be abroad for 3 months and didn't want the apartment sitting empty and was happy to have someone she trusted looking after it. The arrangement, my father told Derek, was $1,500 a month, which was below market for the neighborhood but reasonable for a furnished short-term situation. Derek said he thought that was generous of me. He said he'd paid every month on time, first of the month by bank transfer, to my father's account, not mine. $1,500 a month for 3 months. $4,500 total. Transferred to Frank Holloway's personal checking account while I was in Dubai, managing a water infrastructure contract, and checking my Nashville mail by having my neighbor Paula collect it and text me photographs of anything that looked important. Paula had not texted me photographs of Derek's thank you card because she had not seen it. He'd left it the morning he moved out, the day before I flew home. She'd collected the mail the day before that. By the time I landed at B&A and drove to East Nashville and carried my bag up the second-floor stairs and unlocked the door of my paid-off condo, $4,500 had moved through my property and into my father's account without my name on a single piece of paper authorizing any of it. Derek picked up on the first ring. He sounded genuinely glad to hear from me. He said he hoped the Dubai project had gone well. He said the apartment was great, really comfortable, and he'd taken good care of it. He said to thank me again for the arrangement. I said, Derek, I need you to walk me through how this happened. Start from the beginning. He did. He told me about my father's call. He told me the exact amount he'd paid and the dates. He said he'd assumed I'd coordinated it all before I left, and that my parents were just handling the logistics since I was overseas. He sounded, as he spoke, like someone who was starting to understand that an assumption he'd made 3 months ago was not accurate. Did you ever talk to me directly about this? I asked. Before you moved in? No. Your dad said you were slammed with a new contract, and he was handling the communication. I looked at the hot sauce in my cabinet. I looked at the moved furniture. I looked at the thank you card on the counter. Derek, I said carefully, I didn't know about this arrangement. I didn't authorize it. My parents did not have permission to rent my apartment to anyone. A long silence. Then, quietly, oh no. I told him I wasn't angry with him. I meant it completely. He had been told a thing and had believed it because the person who told him was my father and there was no reason to doubt it. He had paid every month on time. He had left a thank you card. Derek had done everything right in a situation that had been set up wrong from the beginning. I asked him to send me his bank records showing the 3 transfers. He said he'd send them immediately. He asked if there was anything he could do. I said no. I thanked him. I told him to take care. He said, Jenna, I'm really sorry. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen. I looked at the magnolia through the window. It was January, and the tree was bare, but I could see the shape of it, the structure underneath, the thing that would bloom again in April, regardless of what winter had done to the surface of it. I picked up my legal pad. I started writing. Derek's bank records arrived within the hour. 3 transfers. October 1st, November 1st, December 1st. Each one is $1,500. Each one had an account number I recognized as my father's. Clear, documented in exactly what he described. I opened my own bank records and confirmed what I already knew. Not a single cent of that $4,500 had touched my account. Then I looked up my property on the Williamson County Records database, which I checked annually as a matter of habit. The property was in my name. The tax records were current. Nothing had been formally transferred or encumbered. Whatever my parents had done, they had done it informally, which meant there was no legal lease, no formal tenancy agreement, and no documentation of the arrangement beyond Derek's bank transfers and whatever conversation had happened between my father and my cousin in early October. I called my attorney. Her name is Diane. She handles property and civil matters, and I had worked with her when I bought the condo and again when I updated my estate documents at 33. She picked up on the second ring, and I told her everything in 10 minutes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, what you're describing is an unauthorized subletting of your property. Your parents created a tenancy arrangement in a property they do not own and collected rent they had no legal right to collect. The fact that there is no formal lease actually works in your favor in some respects. Derek has no legal tenancy claim. He's already vacated. The money, however, I said, is yours. It was generated from your property. They had no right to it. What are my options? She said I could send a formal written demand for repayment of the $4,500. I could also document any damage to the property and include that in the demand. If they refused or failed to respond within the deadline, I could pursue small claims court, which in Tennessee handled disputes up to $25,000 and did not require an attorney to file. I asked about the property listing, because Derek had mentioned, when I pressed him, that he'd found out about the apartment through a post on Facebook Marketplace. He'd sent me a screenshot. There it was. My apartment. My kitchen with the magnolia view window. My exposed brick living room. My second-floor bedroom has the gray linen duvet I bought in Portugal 2 years ago. posted by an account I didn't recognize. But that, when I searched further, appeared to belong to an email address my mother used for online shopping. My mother had listed my apartment on Facebook Marketplace using photographs taken inside my home without my knowledge. Diane's voice was very even when I told her. She said that was worth noting in the demand letter as a secondary matter. Using someone else's property in a commercial listing without authorization created additional exposure. I said, Diane, I need the letter ready by Thursday. She said she'd have it on Wednesday. I want to tell you about the 2 days between that phone call and the one I made to my parents. Because those 2 days were the ones that cost me the most, not financially, but in the particular way that costs more than money. I walked through my apartment on that first evening and I looked at everything. The furniture was moved, restored mostly to its original position, but not quite. The cabinet with the hot sauce. The coffee mug I didn't own. The bathroom had a faint ring around the tub that wasn't there when I left. There was a small spot on the baseboards in the hallway. None of it was catastrophic. The apartment was essentially intact. Derek had, by all appearances, been a careful tenant. But it was different, inhabited in a way I hadn't agreed to. Changed in the small, invisible ways that spaces change when someone else lives in them. When someone else's daily rhythms move through the rooms you built your life around. I sat on the floor of the living room with my back against the couch, and I thought about my parents, about Frank, who had grown up watching money move through his hands before he could hold onto it, and had never fully changed his relationship with it. About Carol, who had listed my apartment on a website using photographs of my bedroom, my kitchen, my life, as if those images were a resource available for her use whenever she needed them. I tried to find the version of events where what they did made sense as anything other than what it was. I tried to imagine the conversation. Maybe they thought I wouldn't mind. Maybe they thought they were helping Derek in preventing the apartment from sitting empty, and that I'd be grateful when I got home and found out. Maybe they had spent the $4,500 on something they considered necessary and planned to tell me eventually, and the plan kept getting delayed. Maybe. Probably. Almost certainly some combination of all of those things. It didn't matter. The apartment was mine. The money was mine. They had taken one and kept the other and done it while I was on another continent and hadn't said a word. If you've ever come home to find something was different in a way that told you a decision had been made without you, leave a comment. Tell me what that felt like. And if you haven't subscribed to the Family Ledger yet, do it now. Because the call I made to my parents on Wednesday morning is the one that finally put everything on the table. Diane sent the demand letter on Tuesday evening. I read it twice. It was clear, professional, and precise. It documented the unauthorized tenancy arrangement, the 3 months of rent collected totaling $4,500, the unauthorized use of my property in a commercial listing, and the minor property damage documented through photographs I had taken that first evening. It demanded repayment of $4,500 within 21 days and proposed a structured payment arrangement if a lump sum was not possible. It noted that failure to respond would result in a small claims court filing. I sent it on Wednesday morning by certified mail. Then I called my parents. My mother answered. She used the voice she used when she already knew why someone was calling and was buying time by sounding warmer than the situation warranted. Jenna, sweetheart, you're home. How was the flight, Mom? I need to talk to you and Dad together. A pause. Of course. Let me get him. My father came on. I heard the particular sound of the speakerphone connecting and the ambient noise of their kitchen settling around the call. I said, I found Derek's card when I got home. I called him. He told me everything. Silence. I said, I need you to tell me your version of what happened. The full version. My mother started. She said they had thought it was a shame for the apartment to sit empty for 3 months. She said Derek needed a place to stay, and it was family. And it seemed like a practical solution. She said they hadn't wanted to bother me while I was dealing with the contract. I said, you listed my apartment on Facebook Marketplace, with photographs of my bedroom. She went quiet. My father said, we used your key. I know you used my key. I gave you that key for emergencies, we thought. This was not an emergency, Dad. I said it clearly. An emergency is a burst pipe. An emergency is a broken window in a storm. Renting my apartment to Derek for $4,500 is not an emergency. It is a business transaction conducted in my property without my knowledge or consent. His voice got the tight, quiet quality I recognized. We were trying to help Derek. You were collecting $1,500 a month that belonged to me, a long silence. Then my mother said the thing I had been waiting for her to say, the thing that told me they had discussed this, had prepared for this call, and had arrived at the explanation they found most defensible. She said, we were going to tell you when you got back. We were going to give it to you. I looked at the magnolia tree through the window. Mom, I said, the money has been in Dad's account for 3 months. I got home yesterday. You haven't called me once since I landed. She didn't have an answer for that. Where is the money? I asked. Another silence. The kind that has a shape to it. The kind that means the answer is complicated, and the complication is the answer. My father said, "We've had some expenses." What expenses? His voice went quieter. The truck needed work. And there was a bill. He stopped. The $4,500 was gone. Not saved for me. Not set aside. I went into the ongoing financial management of my parents' lives, spent on truck repairs and unspecified bills while I was managing a water infrastructure contract in Dubai, and trusting that the spare key I'd left in their possession was being used with the care I had asked for. I said, "I need you to read the letter that's coming in the mail. I need you to respond to Diane's office by the deadline, Jenna." My mother's voice cracked slightly. "We're your parents. I know you are." I kept my voice level. "And my apartment is mine." Those are both true at the same time. My father said, "You're going to take us to court. I'm going to protect my property and the money it generates. If we can resolve this without a court, I'd prefer that. That's why the letter proposes a payment plan." Nobody spoke for a moment. Then my father said, quietly, "We shouldn't have done it without asking." It was the most direct thing he'd said in the entire call. I sat with it. "No," I said. "You shouldn't have." My parents responded to the demand letter on day 14. Not through Diane's office. Through a phone call to me, which Diane said was acceptable as long as we documented the agreement in writing afterward. My mother called. My father was there, but she spoke. She said they could do $300 a month. She said it would take 15 months, but they would pay everyone, and she was sorry. She said it genuinely, not the performing sorry, but the actual kind, the kind that lives in the voice differently. I said $300 a month was acceptable. I said I needed it in writing. She said she understood. I said I was also formally revoking their key access, that I was changing the locks, and that if they needed entry to the property in the future, for any reason, they would need to contact me directly first. She said that was fair. I had the locks changed that Thursday. I had Diane document the repayment agreement, and both parties signed it. $300 a month. Automatic transfer, first of the month, to my account. The first transfer arrived on February 1st. I checked my phone when it posted and sat with my coffee for a minute, the way I'd sat with it the morning the mortgage paid off. Quieter than the moment probably deserved, but real. I want to tell you what I found when I dug a little deeper, because the deeper layer of this story is the one I've thought about most since it happened. In one of my later conversations with Derek, after the dust had settled and we'd had a chance to talk properly, he mentioned something I hadn't known. He said his father, my Uncle Ray, had called him a couple of weeks before the Facebook Marketplace post appeared. Uncle Ray had mentioned that Frank had been going through a hard stretch financially, and that if Derek ever needed a place to stay, Frank might be able to help him out. It had seemed like an offhand comment. Derek hadn't thought much of it at the time. Uncle Ray and my father had grown up together, the way brothers grow up who share a financial language, which is to say they had spent decades bailing each other out in informal and undocumented ways that left the accounting permanently unclear. My father apparently had mentioned to Ray that he needed some income, and Ray had mentioned Derek. And somewhere in that chain of suggestions and conversations and informal arrangements, my apartment had become the solution. My parents had not rented out my home primarily to help Derek. They had rented it out because they needed the money, and my home was the most accessible resource they could see. Derek was the convenient mechanism. The key was the access point, and my absence was the window. I sat with that for a long time. Not with anger, although anger was there. With the specific grief of understanding that the people who love you can look at what you've built and see a resource before they see a boundary. That love and respect are not the same thing, and the gap between them is sometimes exactly the width of a spare key. The repayment is current, has been every month since February. I know because I check on the first of each month, the way I check on anything I need to monitor. Consistently. Without drama. My parents and I still talk. Sunday calls, occasional visits. My mother asks about the Dubai project and the one after it. My father talks about his tomato plants. We move through conversations in the careful way you move through rooms that have been rearranged, knowing where the furniture used to be and learning where it is now. There is a version of this story where I cut them off. I understand why someone might. But I also understand that my parents are not people who plan to harm me. They are people who saw a gap between what they needed and what was available and moved toward the available thing without stopping to fully reckon with what it would cost them. That is not an excuse. It's a context. And in my family, like in a lot of families, context is where you have to do most of the work. What I changed was not the relationship. What I changed was the access. The spare key is gone. The unspoken assumption that my property is a family resource is gone. The idea that my absence is an opportunity is gone. These were not dramatic changes. Nobody announced them. They just became true, The way things become true when you stop allowing the alternative. I went back to Dubai in April for a follow-on contract. Before I left, I spoke to my neighbor Paula and asked her to check the apartment twice a week and text me photographs. I gave her a secondary contact for anything urgent. I gave her my attorney's number for anything legal. I did not give my parents a key. The magnolia bloomed in April, right on schedule. Paula sent me a photograph from the courtyard. Full bloom, white flowers, the whole tree looking like it had been waiting all winter for exactly this. I was in a site meeting in a conference room in Dubai when the photo arrived. I looked at it for a moment. Then I put my phone in my pocket and went back to the meeting. Home was where I had left it. Mine. The way I had made it mine. Solid in the way that things are solid when they are only yours. Here's what I know after all of it. A spare key is not a blank check. Access is not ownership. And the fact that someone loves you does not give them the right to decide what your property is for while you're too far away to see what they're doing with it. If you hand someone the key to what you've built, be specific about what the key opens. Not because the people you love are thieves, but because love in some families has a long history of not distinguishing between what it needs and what it's entitled to. And the distinction matters. It matters every month on the 1st when the transfer posts. It matters every April when the tree blooms. It matters every time you come home and find things exactly where you left them. That's my story. A thank you card, a bank transfer, and a demand letter that said in plain language what needed to be said. If it found you at the right moment, share it with someone who's given out a spare key and isn't sure what it's been used for. Drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever come home to something you didn't expect. I read everyone. Subscribe to the Family Ledger. I'll see you in the next story.